wanna do now is making it last. Mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends forever, strengthening the ties that keep us together. Mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends forever, strengthening the ties that keep us together.
How can a relationship with money negatively impact our relationships? That is the topic for consideration this time around on Making It Last podcast. And I'm your host, Noreen Daly. And with me is Karlene Kelly-Reid, Financial Solutions Manager at JMMB. Welcome.
Thank you.
Before we started this conversation officially, you mentioned that it's actually the number one cause of divorce. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, believe it or not, a lot of people think it's communication. They think it's sex. They think those are the reasons why marriages break down. Statistics, research has shown that the number one reason why marriages end in divorce is money. So money is a critical part of marriage, of relationships, of making them work.
Why is that though? I'm just wondering what has the research shown?
All right,
and is it somewhat skewed towards, because a particular gender feels this way or what? Yeah.
Okay, it's interesting. Why this happens is that money reveals a lot of your sense of self, your sense of worth, accomplishment, achievement. So your attitudes to money, your approach to money, how you handle money says a lot about how you relate in the world. Okay. And if you are not, especially in a marriage, if you're not matched or you don't understand each other as it relates to finances and money, it leads to a lot of things. Because remember, most of your goals are going to link to money. So in marriage, if you want to get to a home, if you want to have children, if you want to send your children to particular schools, universities, if you want to start a business, no matter the goal, it will have financial implications.
True.
So and within a marriage, you are working together as a team to achieve these goals. So if you can't work out the finances together successfully, it's likely that the goals that you have within your marriage and personally, you will not get there, and it leads to conflict, it leads to problems.
Okay.
Yes.
Somebody's listening to this thing, but I'm not married, so why should I care?
Well, you should care because there are two resources in life that you have to manage, and time is one and money is the other. So in order to achieve any of your own goals, which is why I mentioned personally, you have to be able to manage money. And sometimes people are very good with managing money individually, but when they get together with their partner, it breaks down. So I always say to groups that I speak to, among the 7 biggest financial decisions that you will make in life, your choice of a life partner is one of the 7. So we make a lot of choices in life. The choice of a life partner, as a financial decision, it has financial implications.
Okay. I noticed you said earlier that it reveals a sense of self, but that even in terms of how you view money, don't you think a lot of that has to do with how we're introduced to the whole idea of whether it is saving or just how money, for some people, let's say money is such a bad thing.
Yes.
So you really shouldn't try to amass too much. So, how then can you change, that?
All right, one of the things, research has shown that we learn our habits about money from our family, from how we grew up.
Okay.
So if we had parents who were always worried about money and speaking about money and saying that there are not enough resources, we tend to take that on. So part of understanding ourselves is understanding those things that we were taught as children.
Okay.
So I'll just give you my own personal example. My mother is an excellent saver, she budgets, but beyond that, she never had a sense of investing and trying to make that money grow and work. Okay. So growing up and especially becoming a financial advisor, I've come to learn that there's so much more about managing money and growing money than just budgeting and saving. But I learned that because of how I saw my mother handle money. So it calls for a deep introspection to recognize, where do you stand with money? How do I view money? Do I view it as a bad thing? Do I view it as a negative thing? Am I one who worries because I think it will never be enough? Or am I one who will spend and not worry about the details? If you look into it, by and large, you would have learned those habits from your parents.
True.
Yes, you would.
How then do you, for want of a better, unlearn then, some of what would have been introduced to you maybe over 10, 20 odd years, how then do you unlearn?
All right. Well, it's always about being more knowledgeable, having more information. As I said, for me, my eyes were opened. So I always thought, once you have your budget, once you save, that's enough. And then I realized that my mother takes no risks. So what I'm saying, in order to change that, you really have to open your mind and explore opportunities and speak to the experts and get all the information you can, do the research. You'll find that your whole approach can change.
Yes. Can change. I noticed earlier, you spoke a lot in terms of being quite conscious, or in terms of even, your potential life partner. There's some people who say sometimes that you shouldn't mix friends with business and, of course, money. What's your response to that? Because then that can end up really having people disconnect because, I lent you money, you didn't return it, or, what's your advice regarding that?
All right, my advice regarding that is it's very important to understand somebody else's approach to money.
Okay.
Because you can avoid a lot of problems that way. If somebody has high debt, tends not to repay, I've seen many friendships, as you mentioned, impacted by one party's approach. So I think you have to really try to understand. And even, as I mentioned, in a relationship, you need to understand the other party's approach to money. The funny thing about life is that opposites attract. So very often you'll find somebody who is frugal, somebody who saves, being attracted to somebody who is more of a spendthrift. It happens.
Okay.
The thing to do is to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses so that you can work through that. And it's actually not a bad thing, in the sense that sometimes the person who is a hoarder or a frugal spender really, really wishes that they could let go sometimes and spend the money and not worry about it. And likewise, the person who is very free with money actually admires the person who can be disciplined and budget and save. And so appreciate each other's weakness, appreciate each other's strengths in order to help to overcome some of the weaknesses. Okay. Yeah. So it's really about understanding. Communication is a big part of it.
It's a big part of it. You said several things. You said earlier that it reveals a sense of self. We do learn or we develop an attitude towards money, specifically from our family. And that then teaches us how to save or if we should invest and eventually grow our money. And one thing you touched on just now in terms of how we should really try to understand how the other approaches money, whether it is a partner or whether it's just a friend that you might think of having. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell the listeners?
Okay. One of the things I would say is that, I've mentioned it, communication being very, very important. Also you can actually work out systems that can work for you. Okay. What am I talking about? I'll mention my best friend. How she does it with her husband. All the money goes together in one account. They each get a certain amount of spending money. And because she's very good with money, she's the one who handles making sure the bills are paid and putting aside. What I'm saying is you can actually work it out within your relationship once you understand each other and know each other's weaknesses and strengths. So part of, well, and you touched on it because you said that I mentioned about ego and all of that, or sense of self. Part of the challenge too is that money, for men in particular, is a source of their own sense of self.
The provider.
They're supposed to be the provider and the breadwinner. And so sometimes what will happen is that a woman will give up a little bit of her power because of she understands. That can lead to other issues because sometimes you find that something happens to the male and the woman is left totally unaware of what's going on. So I really believe that a partnership where there is communication, where there is understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses is a better way than saying, okay, you do this, I do this. Why not do it collaboratively? Work together so that it's easier.
If there's somebody who, for whatever reason, while listening to this podcast, got distracted and they were doing something else while listening, what's the one thing you'd want them to get from everything that has been said?
What I'd want them to get is that money is understanding money, your own approach to money, understanding your partner's approach to money is critical to making it work. Because your choice of a life partner is a financial decision. And I believe too that there are ways that you can work through systems to make it work. It doesn't have to be the problem that it is in many relationships. If there is communication, if there's understanding, if there's a willingness to work with each other, it can work.
Thank you so much.
You're
it was a
welcome.
pleasure.
It was my pleasure too.
How can our relationships with money negatively impact our relationships? Maybe you didn't get the answer, or maybe not the answer you anticipated, but I trust you would have gotten some idea or something to help to stimulate your mind and tickle your brain and set you in that direction so you can only have better relationships. This has been Making It Last with your host, Noreen Daly. Until next time.
You loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.